Hello and welcome to Following on County Cricketer. I'm Jon Norma, alongside Nick Friend from the Cricketer magazine, as well as double county championship winner Steve Harmison. We're going to be looking back at the India A Lions game. We're going to be talking about all the blast action that's taken place over the weekend, possibly taking a look at some of the international stuff as well, and just looking ahead to the month of June, which features a lot of white ball cricket domestically and a fair amount of red ball cricket towards the back end internationally. Plenty to talk about here on the show. Thanks for joining us. This is Following on County Cricketer. Okay, guys, good to see you all. Nick and Harmy, I mean, let's start with that Lions game. I mean, when a team comes over to England to get used to the conditions and get themselves, I don't know, get a little bit of practice in there, I suppose. I mean, not all of this India A side are going to be playing in the Test series later this month, but a couple of them are. Karun Nair certainly put his name forward with a double hundred. But you know, at the end of this match, will India feel that they've learned anything at all?
I don't think I've ever seen Karen Nair not get runs.
That's because you're English.
No, I know. I feel like I've seen. I don't know. I feel like I've seen a triple hundreds. Obviously, wasn't there. I've not been there at Canterbury. No, in answer to your question, uh, they've probably learned about the England players, I suppose, and they probably learned. They probably learned lessons about some of their seamers as well, and the same questions that England often ask of theirs in flat conditions. But um, it's 550 plays 550. So, um, yeah, as we sort of said beforehand, before we started recording, I don't know quite how much there is to to say.
The thing I quite found quite ironic and quite hilarious, having spent the last 7 days on my soapbox about bowlers and not bowling enough. England have basically said to counties, you can only bowl your bowlers in so many overs, so many spells, in so many games, and without a break. And then they've gone and produced a wicket, which, I mean, they've had to bowl. Josh Hall's had to bowl 20 odd overs. I mean, all the bowlers. Eddie Jack bowled 20 overs. I'm sure their directives back towards their counties was not to bowl as many overs as they've just bowled in one fielding session. So, look, I like what Nick was saying. You're going to find, what can you really find on an absolute shirt front flat wicket? Do we look into the fact that, Maudsley and Haynes and all these have got big runs, which is fantastic to see, which is great. But where are they in, the pecking order of, if something happens to a Zach Crawley at the top of the order, is Tommy Haynes the next man in and going, right, he's the one in because he just got 100 against India? Are we in a position to say that? If again, I'll come back to the Zimbabwe test instead of during that, in this next game that they've got coming up, if you really think Jacob Bethel is going to play in one of these 5 test matches or some part of these 5 test matches, should he be brought back and not play in the T20 against the West Indies and play in this 4-day game against India to see where he's at? So I think we've learned quite a bit, but
I like this. Yeah, I like this Lions squad for that reason. And there was a bit. I know there were the potential picks, as it were, the young lads who were there on field and that kind of thing. But actually, I liked it because there were guys. It felt like a Lions team, didn't it? And it did feel like not an audition, but a contest, I suppose. And the best you can do, whether it was whatever the conditions, it's still not the full side. So all you could do, I guess, once you're in that position, as I'm sure Harvey knows better than I do for his conversation with Andrew Flintoff and stuff, so that all you could do is get yourself in a position where you would be able to justify your selection if the opportunity came. So if you're Tom Haines, Max Holden, Dan Mosley, Zamakta with 3 for 70 on the first innings, you kind of you tick that box. And I suppose on top of that, like him being in the squad in the first place is a box ticked. I know it was a quite haphazardly put together squad in the end. There were there were one or two guys who were sort of originally in the squad, then weren't in it. There were guys who were in it. Yeah, so the guys who were in it then weren't publicly, and also who didn't make the public cut, as it were. Then obviously there were Chris Wokes, George Hill, Sonny Baker. I think Sonny Baker's injured, but George Hill and Chris Wokes, I think, actually in the end, looked like quite sage decisions to leave them out. I mean, if if we're talking about particularly with Wokes trying to grow the workload gradually of someone like Wokes with the Test series in mind. I mean, if you put Chris Wokes in that field and he bowls 25 overs and 1 innings, and they're now bowling again as we record, I mean, there's every chance not that you lose him, but that you don't get out of him what you want to get from someone who's warming up for the Test series. And likewise, George Hill, I think, was left out because he played all 7 Champion games for Yorkshire, had a brilliant start to the season. And I think in his case, yes, you can push your case by playing for Lions, but I do also think with someone like him, that was his first Lions call up. Actually, being called up is almost the tick in the box, isn't it? It tells you that, it kind of shows you where you are. And once again, like a bit like the Sam Cook pick, a bit like the Max Holden pick with the Lions as well. They're ticks in the box for county cricket. George Hill wouldn't have been, I don't think, too close to the radar 7 weeks ago for this squad. But he's the leading wicket taker in Division 1, the leading English wicket taker in Division 1, level with Kyle Abbott. I think what he gets out of even being named in that squad before pulling out of it to be looked after is knowing that his name is in that conversation. If that's a fair reflection.
Yeah, I like that. And just to knock on from the Wokes one, I think there's a fine balance. I think Chris Wokes probably needs a good 2 or 3 games, good bowl to get him in a position to be ready for that. But I'm not sure a wicket like what we had at Northampton would do him any good, because I think a good bowl for Chris Wokes would be in the field for 75 overs, bowling 20 of them, where he's constantly in the game. Where on this, over 100 odd overs in the field, I think that would have a huge impact. So we might see Chris Wokes play in the next game, bearing in mind he played in the last round of County Championship matches. So going into this one, it probably was a good idea that he didn't play, but it wouldn't surprise me if we see him in the next one, because he still probably needs he'd be a bit short of a gallop going into that selection meeting for the first Test match.
What about from an Indian perspective then? I mean, Karun Nair's probably...
Well, it's that same thing, isn't it? Like, we know where India... We know, I suppose with India, we know a bit more than we do with this Lions squad in terms of what, the positions that are up for grabs, the audition that is going on. They're looking for someone to replace Virat Kohli in the middle order, which is not easy in itself. But then they look at they're going to come away from this. One bloke's got 200 and 2 other blokes have got 90 odd. So, like, no one, I suppose particularly with the Kohli one, the Rohit Sharma one, like, you're talking about guys who everyone knew were coming towards the end of their career for quite a long time. And you'd like to think that an organisation as big as BCCI and a sports team as big as India are not making their judgment on who replaces these guys on the back of one game at Canterbury, one game at Wantage Road. Sure, you can, if it's 50-50, absolutely scoring double hundred is not going to harm your cause, but you'd like to think there is a bit more going into those selections than these games. And if it is Karun Nair, then he's going to be in pretty good nick, I suppose. But if it isn't him, it wouldn't be because he did anything wrong in making 204 at Canterbury. I'd suggest, if that's a fair way of.
England toured India early last year, and Jaiswal played in that series. Sarfaraz Khan played in that series, although he's not part of the squad. Jurel was player of the match in the 4th Test. In fact, England probably would have gone to Dharamsala 2-2 if not for Jurel and Ollie Robinson. His fielding mishap.
Oh, how do you remember all that? That was ages ago. It was like 5 years ago.
We were. To be fair, Nick, we were having a bit of a meltdown at that point, because we had just done a Test match from Hyderabad and a Test match from Visakhapatnam. And the directives from our boss was, Mr. Norman, that if it goes 2-2, we're going to have to go back to Dharamshala. And in the office at the time, when this was unfolding in front of our eyes, we were looking at flights to Nepal and flying in over that way. So we know exactly what happened in that 4th Test.
So that's how you remember.
We were pulling our hair out. Because if you remember, John, it was going to take us the best part of 2.5 days to get there, of which one of our commentators, I'm not going to mention his name, he's just been overtaken as one of England's white ball all-time greats. Mr. Goff, I did say his name. He was of the opinion, oh, I'm only going if I go in the day before. And it's like, Darren, we're going to have to fly to a different country, drive for about 4 hours, get a train for 12 hours, and climb the Himalayas. It's going to take us more than 1 day to get there. So that's how we know, don't we, John?
Yeah, I can't add too
Question
much.
answered.
All I know is that there were no direct flights to Dharamsala available. So we were looking at a 12-hour drive through the most treacherous driving conditions possibly in the world. So whilst disappointed England went on to lose that game, it did get us out of a particularly sticky situation. So yes, that's why I remember Jurel so well. The Border Gavaskar Trophy, Nitish Kumar Reddy, he was a strange one, wasn't he? Because came into that side and he did everything that was needed in the first few tests. Scored a century, batted really well. But by the end, they weren't trusting him with the ball, were they? So I'm not sure. I can imagine him getting a game at some point because that's the way these things go. But again, I think he looks way short with the ball.
Yeah.
Jardel Takur, he played last time, didn't he? He played in England 4 years ago. And actually, he's kind of like...
If you remember, if you go back 2 months, he was meant to be playing in England this April or May, wasn't he? He was meant to be playing for Essex.
He should have been.
There was a sign there, wasn't it? He got injured before he came to Essex, and there was a sign.
He got an IPL replacement gig, I think.
Yeah, anyway, there was a sign that India was sending him to Essex, knowing that he was playing or he was going to be involved in that in the makeup of the first couple of tests. Anyway, and Reddy's a good player. He was really. Can you remember we were in New Zealand, John, in the afternoons? It was on a great time for us sitting in that sports bar in Christchurch watching this. I mean, this young player just take the game by storm. But I think you're right. I think in England, I think they might need somebody to hit the deck that little bit harder. And I think that number 8 hit the deck a little bit harder, especially with Kohli and Sharma not playing. Yes, you might look at the batter, but I think sometimes you have to look at the other way and go, right, we need the fourth bowler to be really, really on it. And Reddy might not be suited until possibly later on in the summer, rather than the first couple of games when probably Shardul Thakur would be the best option.
India have talked here. Obviously, Ravichandran Ashwin isn't available anymore, but lost count of the amount of times India decided to go in with one spinner, and that spinner was Ravindra Jadeja. But the conditions this summer, the pitches being as they are now, and how it's indicated they might be, Ravichandran Ashwin maybe retired a little bit too early? Do you think India actually might end up going in with 2 spinners at some point towards the back end of the series?
Possibly, especially with Washington Sundar as batting, because then he could be then that number 8 fourth seamer stroke spin bowler option that India might look at. I've got no doubt that would be the conversation that's going around. For me, the interesting one would be who's the extra seamer. And I watch. I'm not sure how durable he is, but I watch Arshdeep Singh bowl and swing it in the IPL and swung it in that one-day series that we were covering. I'm thinking him with the Duke in heavy English summer conditions, especially if what we get now, what we've had now, we've had some very, very good weather, dry weather. But when we get rain, it comes in quick bursts and the atmosphere becomes heavy. It wouldn't surprise me if the left armour starts playing. So if he does play, then you might see India go, right, well, if we've got the left armour, why don't we play the sort of, instead of the sort of fourth seamer batting at number 8, we've got a proper batter in Washington Sundar, and we've got an off spinner as well. So I'd imagine there might be the conversations for one or two of the surfaces that we play on, possibly Old Trafford, where it swings a lot, and that wicket's just flat. So they might think, right, day 5, we might need an extra spin option. They might use it at Lords and utilise the swing, and so we've got, both left arm and off spin to sort of work there as well. So that'd be two places I would look at from an England point of view. Worked against England from an India point of view.
Okay, good stuff. Right, plenty of blast action to talk about, as well as some other newsy topics from the world of county cricket. You are joining us here on Following On County Cricketer. This is Following On County Cricketer on talkSPORT 2 and via the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel. Okay, first things first, let's talk Lancashire, because we spent so much time talking about how poorly they've done last season when they got relegated, the season before that when they didn't, but they still didn't perform particularly well. And then, of course, this year where they've been desperate at times. They've lost their coach, their captain stepped down, but change of format, change of fortunes, 3 wins out of 3. And Jimmy Anderson taking his first T20 wicket in 11 years or something?
4,000 days.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's how have you assessed how they? Where have you also? What games have you been at, Nick? Because obviously me and Harmy were at Trent for the Test match.
I
have you done 18?
last
Have you done covered all 18 teams yet?
yeah
Oh yeah,
covered all 18 men's teams. I've done 7 out of 8 Tier 1 women's teams. Gone to my first Blast game of the season. Yeah, quite tired really. But it's good. Yeah, what was your question?
What game are you at?
What game was that? I did.
You've been watching.
What games have you been watching, and how satisfying do you think it is for Lancashire to start the Blast in such rude health?
There were a few counties for whom the Blast came at quite a good time, you'd say, and or rather the Championship, sort of came to a halt at quite a good time. And Lancs were obviously one of them. Kent were another who started their Blast pretty well. Northants, yeah, it's just the change. I think it's a couple of things. I think it's the change of rhythm, and frankly, some teams just better at white ball cricket than red ball cricket. But also, you've got different players involved. I mean, the Northants side that is playing the Blast right now is unrecognisable from the one that in personnel as well as everything else from the side that's been struggling for wins in Division 1. Kent likewise. Kent go from having this very ragtag bowling attack that they've been putting together from all parts of the country on loans and stuff, and to having Tom Rogers in as their overseas. They've known they were going to have for ages. Fred Classon's on a white ball deal. He comes straight in. Lancs, I suppose, are not quite the same. And with Jimmy Anderson, like he'd have played more Championship cricket if he'd been fit. But Chris Green comes in, Ashton Turner comes in. You just get fresh faces who haven't been used to the last 7 weeks, and it is a fresh start. And also the other thing with the Blast is that because so much happens so quickly, and because teams are going from Durham, for example, started at Birmingham, won at Birmingham, and played 22 hours later, I think, at home against Lancs. So much happens so quickly that actually by the time you've won your first game, you've lost your second game, which is what happened to Durham, and this is one of the one of the big schedule issues, particularly that sort of journey. But what it does mean is that like momentum can shift very quickly, and Lancs are a perfect example of that, because they've gone from being no wins from 7 to being what they've won. Where are we? Time of recording, they've won 3 from 3, haven't they? So and suddenly all is well with the world again, and because they've changed the. Am I right in saying it's now 4 points for a win? Have I got that right?
4 points for a win, yeah.
It's now 4 points for a win. It looks like they've won 6 from 6 by old money. But yeah, so suddenly all is right with the world, and and look, there are other bits involved with Lancs, the new coach, and whether that, well, not the new coach, but Del Binkstein leaving and Stephen Croft taking over, whether it's too simplistic to say, new coach, new manager bounce kind of thing. I'm inclined to think it is. I think a lot more of it is down to where this Lancs T20 side is, versus where that red ball side is, and just that freshness I've been talking about. But it's amazing how things changed. Gloucester won the Blast last year, and they'd 0 from 2 this year and got ball out for 90 yesterday. So, it can change very quickly. I was at Middlesex v Sussex on the first night, having just written a piece about Middlesex's struggles in the competition, and they are 0 from 2. Yeah, you know, Sussex who looked the best team in the South Group last year until finals day. I think they're 2 wins from 2 as well. So um, it's a completely different tempo, isn't it, to the season these weeks, because you can completely forget what went on in the Championship. Leicester not lost a game all season. Were 20 for 6 yesterday afternoon and lost to Northants. So yeah, you get this great shift, and that is, I think, the one of the really interesting bits of having, you know, play the season in blocks like this is that you can literally turn the season on its head very quickly, and actually Lancs could march out of the Blast bit back into these 2 champion rounds in late June in a completely different headspace to what they went into it, which is, you know, which is why they're kind of still not out of contention for promotion.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how Sussex go, because they pretty much reserved their worst game of the season, didn't they?
Yeah, for finals day. Yeah,
finals day.
they're not the first teams to do that, and they. But talking about like the momentum shift, like that's the reality of the Blast. You can have a brilliant group stage in June and July, and then you can rock up at finals day in late September, and you've not played the format for a few weeks. And Sussex, if you think back to last September, had a promotion race on their mind, which, you know, they went and won. They got and won Division 2, and whereas if you take Gloucestershire had won the week before going into finals day, with knowing they couldn't really get anywhere in Div 2. I think they finished second bottom in the end. And they went into that knowing that was their season there. Whereas, you know, Sussex were still fighting multiple fronts, I suppose. And Surrey was similar, weren't they? As I'm sure you'll well remember.
Well, I do, but you know, one of the great things about the Blast is that if you look at all the winners of it, I think there are only 4, maybe 5 counties that have never won it. And I suppose the disjointed way that it's been put together, and the fact that, for want of a better word, the bigger counties do lose players in a way that maybe the smaller ones don't. It does mean that camaraderie, the team spirit, the form, that everybody knowing their roles, you know, it does favour the teams that can stick together, and that makes, in a weird way, for a better competition.
Well, Sussex is a great example of that. I think I'm right in saying Rashid Khan never played at finals day, but he got to Sussex. He got Sussex to finals day every time he was there, and Sussex have not won the Blast, I want to say, since 2009, if at all.
We'll have to take your word.
I don't think they've won it, have they? Have they won it?
I don't. I just said that. I decided I don't think. I'm not sure they have won it, but I think they did. They win it in 2009. I feel like I've written about this before. You keep going. I'll find it.
Well, I hate
yes, they did. They did. I'm right. I am right. They won it in 2009. But the point being, they got to finals day all the time with Rashid Khan, and then no disrespect to him, but he came to finals day and Will Beer was playing because Rashid Khan was known. They're very different cricketers and good, you know, very good cricketers. But one is the leading T20 bowler of all time, and one was, you know, a very very handy backup. And it's one of the great arguments for playing the whole thing in a block from start to finish. And I think an even better argument now, because if you really want to have synergy with 100 and you want those wildcards to mean something, it'd be great to be able to pass one from the other, as it were, you know, and get a real flow from one competition to the other with real relevance between them. But we're not there.
I hate to talk about formats, but you did mention it. You know, we know that there's conversations taking place right now about the structure of county cricket in 2026. We're expecting the county championship to be reduced in terms of the games played. We're not exactly sure of the makeup of how many teams per division, or even how many divisions there will be. Promotion, relegation, how many go up, how many go down, that kind of stuff. But there is here a real opportunity for the Blast, isn't there? Because we've been stuck in this, you know, I don't know whether it's self-perpetuating or not, but this kind of cycle where we've been told that Yorkshire and Lancashire can't afford not to play each other twice a year. And similarly, the travel costs between north and south make it prohibitive. So we have these mad situations where teams like Surrey and Yorkshire play each other once every 20 years. Essex, was it Essex, or was it Ravi Bapara had never played Durham?
Yeah, Ravi's debut for Northants in the North Group was like his first year in the North Group was basically a tour of teams he'd not played before. Tamar
so
Mills has never played against Notts. I don't think.
I mean, this. So we have an opportunity here, don't we? Any idea of where they're going to go with it next year? I mean, straight knockout would be interesting.
No, I think they've got a. I think the Blast is. There's still talks on going around all this, and I think there's far less consensus around the format for the Championship than the Blast. I think what we'll see with the Blast is a reduction to 12 games, a move back to 3 more regionalised groups of 6, playing home and away for 10 games. And then I like this bit if they do it, which I know this has been mentioned to me a few times, so I think it's a fair chance, is that the other 2 games in your group will be made up of playing one team in each of the other in each of the other 2 groups, which means that over the course of 6 years, I suppose, you would then be in a position where every county has played every county. There are still loads of examples outstanding from games that have never happened in T20 cricket. So, and I think actually organisers and ECB and people around the game found it quite galling when Durham Surrey happened last year in the quarterfinals, and there was a lot of talk about the number of teams that had never played each other. I think I'm right in saying that Somerset have still never played Durham. And so they were on course to meet in the final last year when the quarterfinal draw was done. So the idea, I think, is that those 2 extra games that you get to take from 10 to 12 would be done to you take one from each of the other groups, which means that over a period of time everyone has played everyone, and also by re-regionalising it, as it were, you also remove a lot of those travel issues. So Northants, for example, are no longer in Durham's group. If you go back to the groups we had back in, Harmy's era of the 2020
Cup.
Hedges. Well, not even that. The early blast, even. So
but in the old Benson Hedges group, that was it. You had, and we were in the same. It was Durham, Yorkshire, Lancashire, which some groups will be stronger than others. We had Derbyshire. Do we have Derbyshire, Middlesex, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire?
Yeah,
were probably in our group. That was in Durham's 6, and then you had like Leicestershire, Nottingham, and Leicestershire, Northampton, Warwickshire, Worcester in that. Then the bottom group. I don't mind that. I really don't mind that. I mean, instead of having, I would play 10 games and then have a knockout competition. Like an FA Cup style knockout competition in the Blast. How you logistically sort that out, I'm not so sure. But these are things to try and help player performance. I'm not sure it's helping chief executive coffers because they want as many Blast games as they possibly can. I'm not worried about the Blast. How the 100 doesn't worry me in connection with the Blast, John. I'm more worried about the Championship. If the Championship went down to 10 games, 10 40 games or 12 40 games, I think that would be a real shame. I don't
think 10's on the table for what it's worth. I don't think 10. Yeah. I think 12 is likely.
Yeah, but I'd like them to play 5-day games. Go to the 90 over 5-day. So you take your game, obviously you take your 2 games out, but you mirror Test match cricket. You're taking overs out of the game because you're not bowling 104 overs, you're bowling 90. You're bringing a 5th day in to make sure you get a result. You're encouraging your spin bowling options then, and you're also encouraging your fast bowling options then. So that's the way I would look at it. And how you got to 12 games, I'm not so sure, because I still like the 2 division. I think promotion, relegation is a must. Not always in the Blast, but in the Championship, you have to have the best players playing best types of surfaces to give yourself a chance to produce your best young players. And that for me would be a non-negotiable. If I was sitting in a meeting on structure in English cricket, these are non-negotiables. We make sure that the best play against the best, and the ones who don't want to play 4-day cricket or 5-day cricket, 4-day cricket in red ball cricket, who prioritise the Blast, they languish down the bottom end, and they can do whatever they want with their sort of cards. But the ones that want to big counties, big areas, they produce proper cricketers who want to play for England and go forward and play against each other. That for me is a non-negotiable with English cricket.
Good stuff. That's probably why you haven't got the job, Harmy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm an old man apparently.
We're all old men. Boy, Nick isn't. This is Following on County Cricketer. Plenty more to come here on talkSPORT 2 and on the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel. This is Following On County Cricketer with myself, Jon Norma, Nick Friend from the Cricketer magazine, and also Steve Harmison. I can't believe it's taken us this long to talk about Jimmy Anderson. I know I mentioned it earlier on in the show, but you know, there was an article. There was an article about missed opportunity when it came to the 100, and a team picking up Jimmy Anderson. I wasn't quite sure what I thought about it because, yeah, the story would be good. It would certainly bring interest. Do you know what I've noticed with Jimmy as well? He does bring an audience. When he speaks, that there are people listen outside of the sport. He's one of the few that has transcended cricket. It'd be interesting to see where he goes from here. But yeah, back playing in the Blast. He of course put himself forward for the Did he put himself forward for the IPL?
Yeah,
he put himself forward for the 100, didn't he? Didn't get picked up in the IPL. But
he still could get picked up in the 100.
He get a wild card. He
could well get a wild card.
I'd like to see it. I would like to see him play. I would find.
I said as a joke to someone last year that I thought that if the 100 balls hadn't swung as they did last year, that he might have retired at the end of the season. Because obviously, like one of the things, and I meant that kind of flippantly, but what has felt clear in the last years, and he said it himself, like he's very keen to see what he can do with white ball cricket, isn't he? Because he's not played any of it for his last list A wicket was 6 years ago, let alone his last T20 wicket, which was 11 and a half years ago, and that was Jimmy Adams against Hampshire in 2014. He's obviously had this itch to scratch, and if you remember, there was that bit in the 100 last year when the balls were hooping and everyone was asking whether it was because the lack was different or because the 100 logo was shiny or something. And Moeen Ali came out and said, "I considering dropping Jimmy a line." And I wonder then if there was a bit of like, an idea popped in his head, like, let's see what we could do with this kind of thing. And he didn't he? And he wasn't doing masses. He just hit the spot, didn't he? And so Colin Ackerman came in. I think I can't remember who he had. Yeah, Graham Clark caught it. Either Graham Clark or Alex Lees caught somewhere, and Ackerman came in first ball, like decent length, just nipped away from him, and he went past the edge, and he bowled his 4 overs inside the first half of the innings, didn't he? And he also went for 6 and a 4 in that 3 for 17. So no, he's very skillful, and it's cool, isn't it? Like, I was at Kane Williamson's presser the day before his debut for Middlesex. There is, in this competition that has been, I suppose, where like this idea of like it's like blue ribbon status has been kind of eroded and challenged over time, over the last 5 years. There is something quite cool and surreal about seeing these A-listers, turning up. And we sat opposite Kane on Wednesday at Lords, and you're kind of looking at him being like, it's so weird. Like, he played at Merchant Taylor's school yesterday against Glamorgan. You're like, how, and that is, that was not Merchant Taylor's, but that was at one point the norm, and having these huge names in the Blast. And obviously a lot has changed and stuff. And even having someone like Jimmy back in, I just think adds a bit of needed storyline and needed interest in a tournament that's still there and it's still going. But you've only got to look at attendances to see that it's not quite what it was in 2017, 2018, 2019. Pre-100, also pre-COVID. I think both are very relevant. But yeah, it was cool with Jimmy, and it'll be interesting to see how many of those he plays. And yeah, as Harvey said, if there is a wild card for him, because I think we've said on here before, like the 100's always had this weird dichotomy between celebrity and Moneyball, hasn't it? If they're the two extremes, I suppose. Like even going back to day one when Shane Warne was the coach of London Spirit, and what's his name? What's his first name? And Andrew McDonald was the head coach at Birmingham Phoenix, and you had these two teams approaching it very differently. And if you know what I mean, and I think that's if Jimmy had got a deal in the draft on the back of no T20 cricket 11 years, you'd kind of go, well, that is a celebrity. He could take 20 wickets the Blast group stage. Different story, right?
Yeah. And I was happy to see him playing. I really was. And watching these 4 overs, he just bowled it in a good area. I mean, how many times do you say to young kids, a good area is in good area, whether you've got a red ball or a white ball? The odd one's going to go out the ground. Like you said, Nick, you hit for 6 and a 4.
Yeah.
He bowled 24 balls in a good area and picked up 3 for 17. The interesting bit about the 100 is whether that ball was swinging and bowlers couldn't a lot of bowlers couldn't handle the swing. If you get a ball like that, Jimmy Anderson will be able to handle the swing, and he will make a bloke 22 yards away look very, very silly. If you got a ball, again, I would imagine they'll look at that ball, and I would imagine it'll be dampened down this year and not be as the movement heavy as what it was last year. But look, I was pleased to see him playing. Every time I see Jim, he looks $1 million. He keeps talking about being frustrated that people talk about his age. And I've said this on following on. I said on H&J about, sometime this afternoon. I mean, when I was 43 and I was retired, I looked like a 43-year-old. He doesn't look like a 43-year-old. He looks anything but a 43-year-old. So while he's in this mindset, not knowing what he's going to do next, the reason why he's got a lot of people talking about it and, he's got an audience is because he's built it up with obviously the tail ender stuff, which is great. While he's still trying to find out, Jimmy Anderson's not playing cricket for money. Jimmy Anderson's playing cricket because he loves the game, and he just probably doesn't know what he's going to do next.
Do you think there's a bit? Do you think there's a bit of him that feels like he's got obviously not a point to prove, but that he wants to prove, that he wasn't? Is there a bit of him that's like
a little bit? I'd imagine deep down, Jimmy Anderson looked at England's bowlers, Josh Tongue, Gus Atkinson, and Sam Cook against Zimbabwe, and going, right, if I go and get 20 wickets in the Blast, and people keep getting injured, they've got to come back to me. Jimmy might still think that, and I know that's but he might still think that. And I tell you what, it wouldn't be that ridiculous. Well, it would, but at the end of the day, you know what you're going to get out of Anderson. He gives you total control, and he can bowl. Jimmy will be able to do this at least 50, because once his pace was gone, it was all about skill. It was all about timing. All into for the bloke who at the other end who's waiting for his technique to fall apart. And that's all Jimmy did for the last 6 or 7 years of his career. And he picked up 250, 300 test wickets at the back end of his career by playing on people's technique in a modern game who want to hit the ball. And we've seen again just the other night, sample size, he bowled 4 overs, people trying to hit the ball in good areas, got 3 for 17. Let's good on him. Oh, good on him. I would like to have seen him coach a franchise team in the 100 rather than go into the draft and get picked up. I'd rather see him coach it and then see if he could do something from a head coaching point of view. But that's a whole different argument.
Well, you can see him again. You can see him as a bowl. If you can see him as a bowling coach in the 100, you can't. It feels hard to see why he would play the 50 over comp this year, like potentially with Lanks. Depending on how Lanks go in the next 4 Champo games pre-100, you can't imagine they'd be desperate to see him bowl loads of balls before September if they were in a promotion race. Which, as I say, sounds unlikely at the moment because where they are. But Division 2, you win a couple of games, as a lot of teams have seen the other way around. Kent were top after 2 rounds, and now they're 18th out of 18. So, it's very. It's like if Lanks have a fit Jimmy Anderson for the rest of the season across 2 formats at least, you can see them, competing on both fronts.
Let's finish off with a look at the Women's Blast. There's some double headers. Surrey will be playing at the Oval. You'll be pleased to see, Nick. But how do you assess how that tournament has started? And do you think it's going to be able to capitalise in the same way that the Women's 100 did, being coupled onto the men's game?
I think so, because, even being at Lords for Middlesex Women v Sussex Women, which was a Tier 2 game, I don't think it would be controversial to say there were more people in the ground for an afternoon women's T20 between 2 Tier 2 teams than there have been for a county championship game at Lords this season. So the double header will always bring people in because because you're getting a ticket for two games the price of not for the price of one, you're getting a ticket for 2 games. So you come and use it for a start, but also just the momentum from partly Women's 100, but also, to be honest, also just the last month and the women's 50 over stuff has been an enormous success, particularly standard wise, the number of runs that have been scored and the quality of cricket, and actually the emphasis put on county cricket by the head coach, which is obviously a bit where the men's team is right now, and a lot of the discourse around selection is goes back to what people feel like is at times a lack of respect or a lack of recognition of county cricket. Charlotte Edwards has done the opposite and gone, I will pick you on the on the on your county numbers, on your county form. So it's put a lot back onto the players, which I think in turn has driven standards, which I think in turn drives attendances and turnouts and yeah, I'd be very surprised if numbers weren't, as you say, that Surrey games at the Oval, particularly having waited until now to play at the Oval, but with Beckham being used until now. Yeah, I'm sure we'll see some really good attendances there, and they'll only drive up with, I think, when people watch the games and realise the improvement in standard by certain players over the winter just by virtue of training every day. I can't overstate how much the move to counties from regions has impacted the quality of play because of the way that counties were able to train over the winter in a way that regions couldn't, because of the lack of ownership and the accountability of counties who now know that, Surrey are far more interested, not far more interested, but Surrey run Surrey now as Surrey rather than South East Stars, which was themselves and Kent together in imperfect, collaboration, I suppose. So the first month of Project Darwin has been fantastic, and I'd be amazed if.
Nick, thank you for your time, and Harmy as well. Harmy, I'll see you at the Oval on Tuesday. We're recording this Monday night, so we're going to be watching the third ODI. What a brilliant innings from Joe Root, by the way, in Cardiff on Sunday. That was, even after all these years, that bloke has still got it. Although I still can't work out why he wasn't giving out LBW when he was on 7.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
What do you think was wrong with it?
Yeah,
there's no way that was given not out on height.
That's
what saved him.
2 noises. The only thing I thought.
No.
But the ball missed the bat by, good.
And then he gave one out later on, which clipped the top of the stumps. Which and look, I know we'll always talk brilliantly about Joe. I would have him in every England cricket team that I would be involved in picking wise, because he's the greatest. But special mention, I thought Will Jacks was excellent. That was a different type of Will Jacks innings. And for somebody who was possibly on the same sort of, maybe he's a little bit ahead of Sam Curran on the face doesn't fit bit. What he'd done to annoy the England selectors. It's good to see him back. You'll see him in the proper role, which would be the aggressor role in the T20s. But I thought he came of age a little bit of understanding his new role now, which is a little bit like what Mo and Ali had. And I thought he played it brilliantly. And I thought he played it perfectly, because if one of them had got out sort of 32nd, 33rd over, game was done. Game was over, because Joe would have, if it was Will Jacks got out, Joe would have to get 200. So, I thought Jacks played really, really well as well.
Brilliant stuff. Nick, thank you for your time, and you, Harmy. And
cheers.
Thanks for joining us on Following On County Cricketer.